Daf Nun Ches Amid Beis. Today's daf is not Daf Nun Tes 59 or 58b. And today the Gemara is going to focus on the order of the Tamid and the Korban Pesach. The Mishnah told us that the Tamid in the morning and the Tamid at night were the first and last in the afternoon, really, the first and last karbanos of the day. And that the exception to that was really the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach would be brought after the daily evening Tamid, the Tamid Shebein Abayim. How do we know that the Tamid has to be done? How do we know that the Tamid has to be done in the daily Tamid in the morning is the first carbon and nothing else beforehand, and the evening carbon as the focus at the beginning. The Gemara is also going to introduce to us the order of things after the Tamid of the evening, the Tamid Shebein Abayim. That there's a requirement to have the Torres, the incense offering, and the Neiros, the lighting of the candles, or the preparing of the candles and lighting of the candles. And the question is going to be where the Pesach, which is after the Tamid, but where does that fit in over there? The Gemara says, this is about 12, 15 lines from the bottom of Nun Ches Amid Beis. Tana Rabbanan. How do we know that there is no carbon that should be brought before the Tamid Shel Shachar, the constant carbon, meaning the daily Tamid of the morning? So therefore it says, the Torah gives an obligation to put in two shtegas rates and two pieces of wood that were put onto the Mizbeach, at least in the setup of the Ma'arachas, the fires, a pyre for the fire that's put on the Mizbeach, and then they would put in these woods, and there's an obligation that upon these woods you will bring the oila, ha'oila. My Talmud. So how do we learn that? Amar Rava says ha'oila, oila rishonim. The fact that it says ha'oila, and either because it's an extra hey, but really because it says ha'oila, the oila, which is there are many oila offerings, ascent offerings. So why does it say the oila? It's talking about the daily one, the one. So you put the wood down, you set up the pyre, you start the fire, and that's the ma'aracha. And upon that ma'aracha, upon that fire, you have to bring you have to put the ola. So you see directly on that comes the ola, the first. And how do we know that nothing else is brought after the Tamid of the evening of Bein Abayim? And upon the fire that you put the oila, upon it you will bring the fats of the shlamim, meaning the rest of the karbonos of the day. My Talmud. So how do we learn that? Rabbi says, upon this oila, upon this tamid, is where you're going to bring all the karbonos of the day, all the shlamim. The shlamim is a generic term for many of the karbonos that are brought, but there are other types as well. Maskefla Rava. So Rava says, Ema shlamim hu deloy nikrav ha'olis nakriv. Well, from the fact that Torah says you don't put shlamim on it, that only on the morning one do you put shlamim, you don't put it on the afternoon. So maybe that only means shlamim has this special rule, which is a type of carbon, the peace offerings, which are eaten by the owner and his friends, but not by oila, by chatas and oilas, other karbanos which don't have those rules. So Elam Rava, rather Rava says the word shlamim here is odd. You bring the fats of the shlamim. Which shlamim we talk about? Which fats? So shlamim over here don't mean specifically the type of carbon, but it's a drash to tell us that aleo hashlem kol kavanos kulam. Shalem can mean complete as well as whole. So the name of the offering is the peace offering, but it also tells us that the complete all the entities, all the karbanos that are brought shall be completed upon the the morning carbon. So the Torah says you put on the fire. Upon it, you put the olah, which is the olah, the Tamid Shel Shachar. Upon that are all the fats must be completed upon that, and then you bring the afternoon carbon. So that's how we know that the morning carbon, the first carbon on the fire, has to be the Tamid, and the last is going to be the Tamid, because everything else has to be on top of that first carbon. Tana Rabban, Tamid Kodim LePesach. So the order is you end the day on Erev Pesach with the carbon Tamid, and after that the carbon Pesach, or really all of the Pesachim, and Pesach Kodim LeKeteres, and the Pesach comes before the incense offering, which is the Keteres, done in the inside of the Beis HaMikdash. All of these karbanos that we talked about before were on the outside, on the large mizbeach that's in the outside in the courtyard, and the Keteres is done inside in the Beis HaMikdash itself. And the Keteres, Kedemes LeNeros, and the incense burning is before the preparing Hatavas Neros and the lighting of the candles. So now we go to Nun Tes Amen Aleph at the top. So the Gemara says, why is it that we have this order? Pesach after the Tamid. We have Pesach and after the Tamid, where usually it should be before, and then we have the Keteres and the Neros. So why is the carbon the Tamid? And we said a moment ago that the Tamid always, all karbanos come before the evening Tamid, and here we're putting the Pesach after. So the Gemara says, "Yuchar davar," we have to delay the matter. Shanema by be'erev ubein arba'im, that which it says in the evening, between the evenings. We saw yesterday when we started the parak that this term bein ha'arba'im is between the evenings, and the Gemara, we mentioned the Gemara in Zvachim Yud Aleph, that talks about how exactly that means the afternoon, but we explained that Erev begins, the evening begins as the sun starts turning towards the evening, and that means from noon until night. And so Bain would be that area, that time between. But Erev in the evening actually means at the end of the evening. And since by Pesach it says both Erev and Bein Ha'arbayim, so that's going to have to be later than where the Torah just says Bein Ha'arbayim, between the evenings, which means the entire afternoon, from noon and on. Whereas Be'erev Bein Ha'arbayim, in the evening, Bein Ha'arbayim tells us later on, Ella Bein Ha'arbayim Bilvad, because by the carbon Tamid it only says Bein Ha'arbayim, it does not say Be'erev in the evening. Well, if that's the case, then the Keteres, the incense, which is brought, and the Neros, the lighting of the candles, also should be later. Should be earlier than the Pesach. The Pesach should be later than these two, because those two also only say Bein Ha'arbayim, which is the afternoon, and not Ba'erev, which is the evening. So Nakdamul Pesach, they should also be before Pesach. As we just said, because we should delay him, do later that which says both evening and Bein Ha'arbayim and Bein Ha'arbayim, and not only Bein Ha'arbayim in the afternoon. So Gemara says, "Shani hasam nemiyat rachmana isa." No, there's a limit. The Torah says by the lighting of the candles that oisai. It has to be what is last, because it has to be lit from the evening till the morning. The Tani will Erev ad boker, from the evening until the morning, you shall light the candles. To tell you, Tain lo midasa shetei delekas me'erev ad boker. Put in enough measure in the candle, in the oil, so that it will light from the evening until the morning. Davar achar, another teaching, and this is the only one of the services that would be permissible or kosher from the evening till the morning. The idea is that this is the only one this is the last thing that has to be started. There are many things done throughout the night in the Beis HaMikdash, but it all has to have started prior to the lighting of the candles. This is the last thing to be done, because it says may erev ad boker, from the evening to morning. This is what starts in the evening. My time, amakra. What's the basis for this? It says in the pasuk, this Aaron and his children shall set from the evening to the morning. This is from the evening and morning, meaning this is what's the last in the evening until the morning, and nothing else may be placed there, in its place. So we have the order like this: the Talmud ends the day, a regular day of Karbanos. As we already know, that the last of the Karban has to be the daily afternoon Talmud. After that comes the Pesach, and not like every other Karban beforehand, because it says both in the evening and in the afternoon, right? So we know it's in the afternoon, but in the evening later part. But Erev Ubein Arbaim, so that's going to delay it. Yuchar Davar, so that matter needs to be later than the Talmud, which only says Bein Arbaim. However, we don't say that in regards to the Ketores and the Neiros, because the Neiros specifically says Yaroch Osod Me'erev ad Boker. This must be set from the evening to the morning, meaning this is the last of the evening, and that's going to go through the morning, and you can't start a new Karban after that. The Iskish Ketores on Neiros. What about the incense? The incense itself is like the Neiros, because they're both the service on the inside in the Beis Hamikdash. And so we have the order that this Bryce had said: first the evening Tamid, the Bein Arbaim Tamid, then the Pesach, then the Ketores, and then which are the incense, and then the Neiros, which are the candles. Matanya Kikoshin. However, there's another brisa that actually teaches like the question where we said let the Pesach be last, because after all the Pesach is the one that says Ba'erev in the evening. So the brisa says like this: Tamid Kedem Ketores. First comes the Tamid, and then afterwards we do the Ketores like every day. The Tamid, the afternoon daily Karban is brought. Then the incense are burnt in the inside of the Heichal, and the Beis Hamikdash, and Ketores Kademus L'Neiros, and the Ketores comes before the menorah and the candles. The Neiros Kados and Pesach, and the Pesach comes last because the Neiros come before that. Because we're going to delay the manner within which it says both in the afternoon and the evening. So the evening tells us that it has to be later. Whereas these other three, the Tamid, the Ketores, and the Neiros, are the daily Karban, the incense, and the menorah. There it only says Bein Ha'arbaim in the afternoon, not the evening. So Gemara challenges what the previous Gemara taught, that wait, but it says by the Neiros Yaruch, so it must be started, the last thing that's to be started, and go from the evening to the morning, from the night to the morning. That's not going to exclude the Karban Pesach, because the Karban Pesach is outside. It's done in the courtyard. This tells us that whatever is done on the inside, in the Beis Hamikdash itself, in the Heichal, that is telling you that the candles go last, and it's only excluding the incense, the Ketores, because there are two things that have to be done in the evening after the Tamid: the incense offering and lighting the menorah. And also it tells us that the candles come last because it says that this must be set from the evening to the morning, as opposed to the Ketores, which is not. But it doesn't exclude what's done outside, and so the Pesach can still be done outside. So that excludes the Ketores. And I would think, since it says that when Aaron lights the candles, Yaktirena, it seems future, he will then literally smokify. He will burn up the incense. So I may have thought first light the menorah and then light the incense. That's why the Torah says, I say this comes for the Ner is the last thing to be done in the Beis Hamikdash, but it does not exclude the Pesach, which is done outside in the courtyard. So if that's the case, so why does the Torah say that in the evening you will smoke a fire, right? You'll burn it up. It's what it means to tell you is that at the time that the candles are being lit, the Ketores has to be giving off incense, burning. So we have two versions of when the Pesach is inserted into what is a daily routine of you end the day with the afternoon tamid, the Ketores, the incense offering inside, and the lighting of the menorah, the neros inside. And do we put the Pesach before the incense and neros, the Ketores and neros, the incense and menorah, or do we put it after? And it's all based on that the tamid, the Ketores, and the neros. It says bein ha'arbayim, the afternoon, and by Pesach it also says bein ha'arbayim, but it also says be'erev, in the evening. Tanrama. So now we're going to analyze some of these halachas that we learned. The Brisa taught, in the morning, before the first tamid, before the carbon tamid, you can't bring any karbanos, as we said, that you have to set up the fire on it, and on it the morning tamid, the olah. But what you can't, the only thing that can come before that is the Ketores, the incense offering, again on the inside, while the can come before the that comes before the outside. The tamid is brought. Because it says in the way the Torah says every morning to do it, it says in the morning. So that tells us every day, but it also tells us that it's the morning, the first thing. So the Ketores, the morning incense, are going to be first because let's have the Ketores, which it says double in the morning. The Ksevik of Aaron Ketores Samin Babika, as it says, Aaron will literally smokify the Ketores, the incense, every morning, but it says in the morning. And that should come earlier than to that which it says only one morning, which is the tamid, where it says that you'll bring it in the morning. And also, nothing comes later than the evening tamid, ella ketores, besides for every day the incense, veneros, and the lighting of the candles, two things we saw already, and these are done inside the Beis Hamikdash. Upesach, and the Pesach offering, which is done on the outside. This is not telling us an order of things, just a listing of things that come later. And now this Brisa adds a new component, which the Gemara is going to analyze. And one more thing can be brought after. We just said that every carbon, in order to be valid, it has to be between the two tamid offerings, between the morning tamid and the evening tamid. Well, what about someone who brought a carbon Pesach? And in order to fulfill the carbon Pesach completely, he also has to eat that carbon Pesach. If he was tamei, he would have had to bring certain tumas. We know that besides for going to the mikveh, you still have to have the sunset. And besides for that, some of them also need the next day, on the 8th day of their tahara process, to bring a carbon, which is called mechusar kippurim. They're still lacking a part atonement. And when they bring that carbon, then they are fully tahor. So the question is, what happens if somebody brought the carbon Pesach? His 7th day was the previous day. Today's the 8th day, and they're supposed to also bring their tamid, their carbon, their offering, which is going to complete their tahara process. But it's already after the tamid. They forgot to bring it beforehand, especially on a day when there's everybody's busy with the carbon Pesach, and the tamid, the afternoon tamid is brought early, and they missed the opportunity to bring it. So now they're missing a carbon. They must have that carbon in order to eat the carbon Pesach, but they can't bring it anymore. So we're going to allow that carbon to be brought to allow them to eat their carbon Pesach. Just as the Pesach can come after so too that which is needed, required in order for this person to eat the Korban Pesach, will also be brought after. So that person will go to the mikveh again, and then eat his Korban Pesach. In order to eat the Korban Pesach, he needs to bring his Korban, and then go to the mikveh, and then only can he eat his Korban Pesach. So that extra Korban is a necessity for his Pesach, so it's allowed to be brought. Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Breka Omer af mechusei kippurim b'shayim l'sasham. To which Rabbi Yochanan ben Breka says, actually, this is not only for Pesach. This same predicament can happen on any given day. Every day of the year, there's someone who needs a Korban, who's missing their Korban. It wasn't brought in time between the two, between the morning and evening Korban, Talmud. And they have another Korban that they have to eat. So if they're going to delay their Mechusei Kippurim to tomorrow, they're going to miss out the opportunity to eat their Korban. So they have to. So they too will be allowed to go and bring their Korban after the Talmud in order to allow them to eat whichever Korban they're eating. So too so that he will go to the mikveh again and eat kachim le'erev that evening. And John asked, why do you have to go to the mikveh again? They went already on the seventh day, but since they were missing a component of the Korban, so they're going to the mikveh the first day did not affect them in the fullest way of tahara. They still need to bring the Korban and go to the mikveh again to complete their tahara process. And then that evening they'll be able to eat their Korban, whether Pesach, according to the first opinion, their Korban Pesach that evening, or according to Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Breka, every day of the year. This is what they're allowed to. Now, to review this, because this is important just to understand the next section. The Mechusei Kippurim is someone who became Tamei. Let's say he was Metzora. Okay, he had a tzaras, he had leprosy. That left him. He's now able to come back in the community. 7-day tahara process. He completed his tahara process. There are various karbonos he needs to bring on the 8th day. Various offerings he needs to bring, and he forgot one of them, and so he won't be able to eat the Korban Pesach tonight. Therefore, even though that the afternoon Talmud has already been brought, he's allowed to bring what he's missing as his personal Korban. This way, he can go to the mikveh again and eat the Korban Pesach that night. And Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Breka, says the same is possible on any given day when he has a Korban to eat. So Bishlama, the Gemara says, it makes sense. Latana Kama, the first opinion makes sense. Why? Yavei Aseda Pesach, because the obligation to eat the Korban Pesach is a very strong positive commandment. What does it mean? It's a strong positive commandment. Missing this, the eating of the Pesach, is actually punishable by kares, by the soul being cut off from its source. So that's a severe punishment, telling us that the obligation is very strong. However, the obligation of all karbanos being brought on the morning Tamid, that's a lesser degree obligation because it's a positive commandment, but it's a positive commandment that doesn't have a kares attached to it. And the Mefarshim asked that actually someone else is doing that transgression. The Kohen is the one that's transgressing, bringing the offering at the wrong time, and it's permitting the person who was tamei to do his mitzvah. So how can one person sin to prevent someone else from losing out a mitzvah? Not our discussion, but it is an interesting component of this Gemara. The point is, however, that the obligation of Pesach is much stronger. It's kares. It's stronger than the daily obligation of bringing all karbanos on the morning Tamid. And so therefore it makes sense that we would say that Pesach supersedes, the need to eat the Korban Pesach supersedes the need to bring all the karbanos before the afternoon Tamid. And so here we're going to bring this carbon even in the afternoon in order to save him from missing out on the Pesach. But according to the second opinion, according to Rabbi Shmuel in the Brisa, there's an obligation to bring every carbon on the morning Tamid. There is an obligation for this person to eat his carbon that he had brought that day, the shlamim. So who says that that's more that should take precedence over the carbon order? You missed your time. You missed the time. I'm sorry, but there is an obligation to have brought this carbon on the morning Tamid before the afternoon. You tell me, oh wait, you have a mitzvah to eat a carbon. I'm sorry, that's not any stronger than the mitzvah of having brought the carbon in its time. Amar Avina, Amar Rav Chisda, Hacha Bechatas Eifas. So Rav Chisda actually says, we're talking about a bird offering, which is one of the offerings that a Mitzorah would bring. A poor Mitzorah brings a sin offering that is of a bird. And then it doesn't actually go on the fire, just the blood gets spritzed on the Mizbeach, but none of it goes onto the fire. And so you don't have to transgress the obligation of every carbon that goes on the fire goes onto the morning carbon and not the afternoon carbon.
Or a bird goes on the fire.
Not the Chatas Ha'of.
Yeah. Well, the Kohanim eat it.
The Kohanim eat it, but it doesn't go on the fire of the Mizbeach. Since it doesn't go on the fire of the Mizbeach, it's not going to contradict the obligation that every carbon that goes on the Mizbeach has to go on the morning carbon and not the afternoon carbon. Right? So the Chatas Ha'of, the bird Chatas, is the one that he forgot to bring. And She'ela Mizbeach Eladama, that the only thing that goes on the Mizbeach is the blood and not the bird itself doesn't go on the fire, the Kohanim eat it. Rav Papa says, Rav Papa says, no, we don't have to say that Rabbi Yochanan is talking about specifically one type of carbon. No, he's talking about any carbon. He's talking about the Chatas Behema as well. And you're right, you wouldn't be allowed to put it on the fire. But there's another way around this. What they would do is they would bring the carbon, shecht it. There's an invalidation of any carbon that was left overnight in the Beis HaMikdash from yesterday to today, unless it's up on the Mizbeach. So what they would do is they would bring it up on the Mizbeach, put it on the top of the Mizbeach, and leave it there, not in the fire, because you can't put it in the fire yet, because it has to go on the morning tummy. But it has to be on the Mizbeach. So we leave it on the Mizbeach, but another corner in the Mizbeach, not in any of the fires. Mala, he would bring it up, umalina b'rosh Mizbeach, and he would put it on the top of the Mizbeach on its head. In this way, the next day after the Talmud, they could put it into the fire. The Gemara says, okay, so that takes care of the Chatas. But what about by Ikash Asham? There is another type of sin offering, an Asham, that he would have to bring. So Bishlam Rav Papa hiding the Malin. So according to Rav Papa, it makes sense that this too would be put on top of the Mizbeach. But according to the first opinion, Rav Chisda, who said, you know what? Oh, we're talking about a bird offering. Well, the Asham is never a bird offering. The Asham is always going to be an animal. Well, perhaps what's going on is that he had remembered and earlier in the day brought his Asham, but he had forgotten to bring his Chatas. Okay. But the Mitzorah has to bring, besides for the sin offering, the Chatas, and the Asham, he also brings an Ola, an ascent offering. And this you can't say that it's not going to hold him back from his atonement, and he can eat his carbon without that. That's not true. If for sure the Mitzorah has to have the ascent offering. We learned just as a sin and asham offerings hold him back, and he's not completely tahor until he goes through that process. So to the oila is going to hold him back. So that's for sure. He needs to have the oila. So we've already talked about his sin offering. It's either a bird or an animal in two opinions, and the asham as well. And the asham was either already brought or is overnight on the top of the mizbeach. But what about the olah? And if you're going to tell me, well, he already brought the olah earlier in the day, that can't be. You can't bring the olah before the chatas. The chatas offering has to come first, and then the olah. And if he didn't bring his chatas, he forgot that, so he didn't bring his olah either. And he will bring close that which was the chatas was first. What does it mean? What to teach us? It's to tell us that the chatas comes before the olah. That we already know. It says clearly that the second one is going to be the olah. So rather, this comes to teach us a general rule. Always, as a general rule, a chatas has to come before an olah. If they come together, a chatas and an olah, the chatas comes first and then the olah. And even a bird chatas has to come before an animal olah. So how is this person going to fix himself anyhow? If he didn't bring the chatas, he can't bring the olah. He wouldn't have brought the olah. Amar Rava, shiny olas mitzora. No, the olah of the mitzora is different. And the Rachmana Amma, because the Torah said it, we turn to Nun Testament base. Vehela hakoynes ha'olah. He had it's in the by the sin offering. Over here it says, and he had brought up the olah. It should have said, and he will bring up the olah, the future. And it says it vehela in the past tense. He had already brought it up, meaning that in this case, the olah can come first. And this is the Torah telling us an exclusion to the general rule that a chatas always comes before him. So we had this scenario in the Brisa that told us that if somebody had forgotten to bring a carbon that will allow them to eat the carbon Pesach or any carbon throughout the year, according to Rabbi Shmuel, that they would then also bring their offering that needs to be done in the afternoon, their chatas, and put it on top of the mizbeach. According to the second opinion, first opinion, it's talking about a bird. The idea is that whatever they need in order to be able to eat the carbon Pesach, they would be allowed to do in the afternoon, even though that the tamid had already been brought. Now, what do you do with the carbon? You can't put it on the fire. So we saw that you would put it on Rav Papa said he would put it on top of the mizbeach, not in the fire because he's not allowed to anymore, but not leave it down because then it would become invalidated overnight. So Amar le Rav Shama bar Abba Rav Papa. So he said to Rav Papa, according to your explanation, that the way to keep this carbon valid is the Amris Ma'ala Omelina Barosh Mizbeach, which you said that you bring it up on the Mizbeach, but you don't put it in the fire, just leave it overnight on the top of Mizbeach. Kaima Ba'avdin Milsa La Kahanim, are we going to do something that's going to confuse the Kahanim? The Asabel Ledeta Kala, they're going to make a mistake. You're putting a carbon on top of the Mizbeach. Usually when a carbon is there, it's got to go in the fire. A Kohen is doing his job and putting the offerings onto the fire throughout the night. Is going to see this and going to make a mistake and put it on. The Savri Diyomihu is going to think it's proper day, and he's going to put it on the fire. Amalei Kahanim's reasoning. Now the Kahanim are Zerizin, are very diligent, and they'll know this is a mistake. A carbon, it stays here and doesn't go on the fire. Amalei Rav Ashi of Kahanim, Amalei Rav Huna Berei Rav Nassan Rav Papa. Some say that it was said Rav Kahana or Rav Papa. We have a general rule that as long as the parts that go on the mizbeach, which are called the emurim, are not being burnt up on the fire, the kahanim may not eat their portion. The Tanya, as we learned, perhaps you think that the kahanim are allowed to eat the brisket and the thigh before the parts that go on the fire and on the mizbeach have been burnt up, smokeified. Talmud loymar v'hiktir hakayin es achelim. And so therefore it says the kohen will hiktir, literally smokify, he'll burn up the fats, hamizbecha on the mizbeach. And after that only does it say v'hadar v'hayachaz al aron levanav, and the kahanim can then eat the brisket. Now, so we know that in order to eat their portion, the kahanim eat their portion, the carbon would have to be on the fire on the mizbeach. And over here we're saying the fire, the portion is not on the fire until the next day. So the kahanim cannot eat their portion. Okay, so far so good. So the kahanim won't eat, but at least the owner can eat his carbon pesach. Well, actually that's not true either. We have a general rule. Until the kahanim do not eat their portion, the person who brought the carbon is not fully atoned. In order for a person to have atonement, the carbon has to be done properly. The parts have to go on the fire, which allows the kahanim to eat. And when the kahanim eat, that's when the person who brought the carbon, the owner of this carbon, miskapri, would get his atonement and then can go on. So if you want to say that this person is missing a carbon, and therefore he can't eat the carbon pesach, so what we're going to do is we're going to put the parts that have to be burnt on the top of mizbeach, but not actually burn them. That means the kahanim can't eat their part. If the kahanim can't eat their part, the owner doesn't get his atonement. The Tanya, as we learned, they will eat them, that which is the atonement for them. That the mitzvah of the kahanim eating is going to be the last step, which is going to affect the atonement for the owner. And so in this case, that's missing. Amar Le, he said, you're right. That in general, we say that the kahanim can only eat once the parts go on the fire, and that there's only atonement once the kahanim eat. However, but in this case, where you can't do it, so asam kamisha nitmosha avdu. This is similar to when the limbs got misplaced, or if the limbs became invalidated because it became tummy. In such cases, you can't put them on the fire on the mizbeach, obviously if it's lost, or even if it became tummy. The Tanya, as we learned, yochel nitmu emurim. We think if the parts that go on the mizbeach became invalid, or they got lost, that the kahanim cannot eat their portion, and therefore, if they can't eat their portion, the owner doesn't get atonement. Therefore, the Torah says, and it shall be to Aaron and his children, that brisket is going to be their meat, mikol makam, in any case, which tells us that it's true. In general, they should not eat it until the parts that go on the mizbeach are on the fire. And therefore, that's the order. The parts go on the fire, the kahanim eat their portion, and then that brings atonement to the person who brought the carbon. However, that's only if it's possible to bring the parts onto the mizbeach. But if they got lost, they became tummy, or in this case, where then they missed the deadline and they have to wait for the next day, in either one of these cases, the kahanim could still eat it, and that would be the atonement for the one who brought the carbon, where that person can now eat the carbon pesach that night. Rav Kahana Rami. Rav Kahana asked a contradiction. Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, Lo yolon chelev chagi ad boker. Do not allow the fats of my holiday offering to remain until the morning. Ad boker until the morning, you can't leave it. But you can leave it all night, meaning you don't have to bring it up on the mizbeach all night. You don't have to burn it up all night. And it's only going to be invalidated if it's at the bottom of the mizbeach. It's not on the floor of the courtyard and not on the top of the mizbeach when the morning comes. Which tells me that I can burn it all night. It also says, and you will burn upon it the fats of the shlamim upon the morning tummy, meaning that during the day is when you have to burn the fats. You have to bring the fats on the morning carbon, and so they have to be burned through the day and not through the night. So he asks the question, but he also answers and explains like this. Kishani Taisra, that the carbon was done properly during the proper time. That during the day, they spritzed the blood, and so the carbon was brought properly. However, they couldn't complete all of the carbonos during the day. So as long as the carbon was brought during the day at the proper time, you can complete its service after. You can complete its service afterwards as well, throughout the night. Rami le Rav Safra le Rav, and Rav Safra asked Rav. Probably the text is Rav over here because Safra was younger. So he asked Rav, "Ksiv leyalin lezevach laboka zevach hagapasa." Don't allow the carbon pesach to remain until the morning. Don't let it remain until the morning. So that tells us that you can, throughout the night, burn it up on the Mizbeach. And even though that it is Yantiv, so you shechted the carbon on Erev Yantiv, and you're burning it on Yantiv itself. Now, even though that it was a weekday carbon, and now you're going to burn it on the fire of the Mizbeach throughout the night. Wait, that on Shabbos, you're only allowed to bring a Shabbos carbon. You can't burn, you're not allowed to burn something on Shabbos. You're not allowed to add to a fire on Shabbos. So you can't burn up a carbon on Shabbos unless it's the Shabbos carbon. So too over here, on Yantiv, you're not allowed to bring a weekday carbon and put it on the fire on the Mizbeach on Shabbos or on Yantiv. A weekday carbon cannot go on Shabbos or on Yantiv. But you just told me that the Pesach can be burned throughout the night. This question is a great question and was already asked previously by Rabbi Abba Bar Chia to Rabbi Abo. And he explained to him that this verse that says that you can bring the carbon throughout the night, carbon Pesach can be brought throughout the night, is in one particular case where Erev Yantiv was on Shabbos. So you're allowed to bring the carbon, even though normally you can't bring a carbon on Shabbos, only the Shabbos carbon. Nevertheless, Pesach, which has to be brought on the 14th, can be brought on Shabbos. And since it was brought on Shabbos, you can even burn it on the Mizbeach on Yantiv, because a Shabbos carbon can be brought on Yantiv. The Chelbe Shabbos craving Yantiv Amalei, he said, wait, are you telling me that pasuk is talking about one particular case where Erev Pesach the 14th was on a Shabbos? Mishum the Chelbe Shabbos craving Yantiv Anan Neku v'Nemalei the High Kra Arba Asa Shchalis b'Shabbosu, because that's the only way we know that you're allowed to bring the fats of Erev Yantiv on Yantiv. We're going to say that that's what the pasuk means. Amarle, yeah. Shavke lekra, allow the verse to explain itself to you. Shavke lekru do dacha k'mokem anafshe. It's explaining itself to you, even if it's a narrow explanation. But since we already know that you're not allowed to bring a offering from a weekday on a Shabbos or on a Yantiv, and it says the Pesach can be burned throughout the night, obviously it's talking about when Erev Yantiv was Shabbos. Yashikach, thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you, Yeshua.